part 2 of organizational communication, peer and coworker interpersonal relationships. All right, so in part 1 we talked about the inevitability of interpersonal relationships amongst peers and coworkers, and then we talked a little bit about the different kinds of relationships that people can have. So now what I want to discuss is I want to talk about the bright side, basically the good things that fall out of having strong interpersonal relationships with the people in the organizations that you're a part of. Now, this is both helpful from a person who is a member of an organization and as a leader. As a member, this basically is a guideline of the things that you can get out of the people through the information, through the relationships that you have in the organizations that you're a member of. And also, if you're a leader, these are the things that you can elicit out of the members of your organizations if you can foster positive interpersonal relationships. Right? Okay, so some of the things that you get. One of the most basic is task support. Okay? Task support, is simply defined, it helps the members of the organization actually accomplish the things that the organization sets out to do. Of course, task support is a good thing because you want your people to be able to do the work that it is that you do. Now, how does a relationship help with task support? Well, think about it. If you have a good relationship with someone, you're more able to ask them sort of dumb questions that you might actually be embarrassed to ask someone that you weren't a friend of. But if you're good friends with somebody, you'll ask all the questions that you really need. Also, if you're friends with someone, they might notice that you're struggling with something before somebody else notices because they know you really well. And thirdly, they're probably going to be more interested in your success inside the organization since they're friends. So supporting you in your organizational tasks is actually important to them because they value you as a friend. Okay, so that's sort of the basic one, task support. Another thing that coworker relationships offer is emotional support. Okay, work, be it professional, nonprofit, charitable, whatever, is stressful. In fact, there are some jobs, there are some tasks that are purely stressful. That's the only reason they exist, to help people blow off stress. But whatever the case is, friends inside the workplace bring meaning, and they order your suffering in certain kinds of way by giving you emotional support. So, if you notice, a lot of times, you see two people who have the same job, and they'll start bitching about something that that happens inside that organization. Right. In our class, sometimes serving came up, and myself, who had been a server, and the other servers in the class would sort of give each other emotional support when we would commonly bitch about problems that we suffered in the service industry. Anyway, so part of the way that we provide emotional support through our interpersonal relationships is just sort of like sharing in that particular, or in the generalities. But it also helps because they know you, and they also know the workplace, so they're capable of specifically supporting you on the particular emotional need. See, when you go home to your friends or family, if you bitch about your boss, you sort of have to give them all of the information in order for them to even understand why what your boss did today was so horrible. Whereas your coworkers, they're in it, they're in the trenches, and they know your boss already, and they have privileged access to the emotional strains that you're experiencing, and because of that, they're in some ways more capable, or at least it's easier to get emotional support from them. Another form of emotional support, but I want to use it as a different category, so I'm going to say it's the third thing that interpersonal relationships in organizations give, is that it offers sense-making processes. Things happen inside organizations. You go to work and you get written up, or you have really bad customers, or you're working on building houses for homeless people, and maybe it really goes really well, or it goes really poorly, or the concrete guys don't show up, whatever. Right? Whatever, good or bad, happening inside of the organizations, all human beings desire to make sense of what's happening to them. And this is something that happens in organizations and outside of organizations. If you get dumped, you try to make sense of it, right? If you win the lottery, you try to make sense of it. You have a child, you try to make sense of it. Humans are always making sense of what's happening to them. But in organizations, part of the corporate nature of an organization, it involves multiple people. Very often, in order to come to actual satisfying sense of what's going on in the organization, people desire to talk it out. And you will notice in organizations where there are radical changes, whether they're good or bad, is that you have a lot of sense-making procedures. You have coworkers, peers, who are talking about the events, going over, and basically they're sharing stories, and they're not sort of arguing, although sometimes sense-making involves agenda perpetuation. But most of the time what they're doing is they're trying to come to a common understanding. They're sort of sharing explanations of what has happened, and the explanation that makes the most sense, the explanation that sort of feeds them or brings them to the most peace, is the one that sort of wins out. And so you'll notice oftentimes, I mean, this certainly has happened in organizations I've been a member of. I've been at workplaces, right, where the boss is a little nuts. And you'll notice everybody in the beginning might be suffering the nutsiness separately. But eventually, if it gets bad enough, they'll start getting the courage to share with other people. And as they do so, a new understanding of the boss starts to emerge, right? A new interpretation. And there are different people who are offering different reasons. Well, maybe he does this because of this reason, or have you noticed he flips out in these situations but not those situations? And as those things get passed on, the one that offers the most sense, the one that makes the most sense is the one that wins, right? So we've got task support, emotional support, sense-making. Another important thing, and this one's pretty simple, but gossip. Interpersonal relationships foster gossip, right? People like to talk with people that they know. And inside organizations, gossip very often serves a powerful and positive role, because not all information is adequately transferred through official means. Sometimes somebody forgets to put the time of the meeting in the newsletter, but if there's enough gossip, the people who know will eventually tell the people who don't, and everybody will get there on time. Even though the official medium failed, the gossip will sometimes bring up the ranks. There are other things that gossip, of course, also offers a thing of sense-making, is a mode of sense-making, but gossip in and of itself is an informational tool, and it is fostered by interpersonal relationships. There were times that I could get stuff done in the youth group simply by telling people, not relying on newsletters or the bulletin or emails or anything like that. Just simple word of mouth transmitted by the relationships that I knew already existed. And if you can use lines of gossip, and if you sort of are aware of them, sometimes you can tell 3 or 4 people and know that those 3 or 4 people touch up with different groups, and the information will get dispersed all the way throughout. Another important part of what relationships does is that it offers feedback. There are ways in which your friend will tell you something that a coworker will not. And there are times that you need feedback inside your work, and you can only really trust the people who really care about you. Very often, if you are struggling with whether or not you should keep this job, most people who are members of the organization, often they value the process of the organization, and they, out of the good of the organization, will try to convince you, no, you should stay. Whereas you can be a little bit more confident in your friend's feedback because they have a vested interest in your humanity, and they may be able to give you more accurate feedback about whether or not they could stay because of their friendship relationship. I'm going to check my notes here for a second to see if I'm forgetting anything. Oh, finally, I guess I'll end on this note. Friends very often see you in a positive light. They see you for your better nature. And so having friends inside of an organization can give you excellent support, and they can actually help you accomplish your organizational task better, because in some ways they give you the benefit of the doubt, and the way that they see you often inspires you to live up to who you can really be, as opposed to you simply being another cog in the wheel. So that task support, emotional support, sense-making, gossip, feedback, and seeing people for their better natures. Those are the positive things that you stand to gain by having solid interpersonal relationships in the workplace. Next video, part 3 of 3, is what are the bad things? What are the possible side effects of having strong interpersonal relationships inside your organization? Till next time.